Hey guys, it's Laney and welcome back to the shop. It seems like forever since I've gotten a video out, but here I am, my first video of 2012, and as I talked to you earlier in the year, this particular project is going to be how to etch a brass plate. Now, it's not just going to be a brass plate, it's going to be a brass sign with a nice little wooden stand for it to sit on. This particular stand is made of walnut and oak, and the backer board to the brass plate is going to be made of walnut. I'm going to show you the steps on getting the plate etched in the ferric chloride etching solution, and also I'm going to walk you through the steps of making the little support for the sign to sit on. So without further ado, we'll get into this project and I'll show you how it's done. Alright guys, just like with every project, we're going to start with the design and go from there. Now, we know that the brass plaque that we're working with in this particular project is 10 inches by 4 inches. So we want our design that we're going to be printing out, we want the print size to equal the size of the plate that we're working with, that we're going to be etching. And depending on the photo software that you use, or the graphic software that you use, it may vary a little bit from this procedure, but it's pretty much all going to be the same. The program I am using is Corel's Paint Shop Photo Pro X3, and first thing I want to do is go ahead and create a new canvas. Now I want to make sure that the print size of my canvas is the same size as my plaque, which is going to be 10 inches wide, 4 inches tall. And those settings are already preset in there because I use this program a lot for them. Alright, now we need to figure out what we want in the design. And for this project, I'm going to go ahead and make a plaque for the company. I don't have a company sign, so I'm going to make a small plaque for the company. Now, from there, if you notice the gray and white checkered background, we need to go ahead and give it a background, and in this instance we are going to do a solid white background. So I want to create a new layer, and I want to come over and select my paint bucket tool. Make sure I change my color to white. We're going to be working with black and whites when you're doing these plaques, guys. Go ahead and flood fill that and take this layer and send it to the bottom. Alright, now, okay, pretty simple. What I want to do now is I want to go ahead and turn this into a negative image, because I want, when I photocopy this onto the transparency paper, I want all of the white to be black and I want all the lettering to be clear. Over here under image, I'm going to go down to negative image, and there you go. I'm going to go up and make sure I'm going to resize this and make sure that I am at my print size. Here is, see, I'm at 10.5 by 4.20. we want to go ahead and make that 10 by 4. And it automatically puts in the 4 in there. So we're going to resize it. Not much of a change. Save that. Alright guys, once you go ahead and save that file, your design, we want to mirror it. Now you need to see if your program that you're working with has a mirror option, or if when you print, if your printer options, if you have where you can print it in mirror image. This software does have a mirror option, so we're going to go ahead and do that. And what it does is it creates a mirror image, reverses everything. That way, when it transfers onto the plaque, it will read correctly. So from there, we can go ahead and print. Alright guys, we just finished creating and printing our design, and if you recall, we printed that design in reverse image, or mirror image should I say, And that way when we take it, I went to a local copy store, Staples. You can go to your local copy store, use their Xerox machine and copy it onto some transparency film. The transparency film, the Xerox machine, the toner from the Xerox machine will act as a resist for the chemical we're going to use to etch these plates. Now, to recap some of the things and to go over some of the things in my older video, one of the things that you're going to need is the PCB etchant solution, and the main ingredient in this is ferric chloride, and ferric chloride is going to be our etchant solution. Now, if you can get, you can order it offline. You can actually order ferric chloride online, but it's just as simple to run down to Staples and pick up, or not Staples, Radio Shack, and pick up some of their etchant solution. The brass plate we get from any hobby store or hardware store, and this is a 10 by 4 inch brass plate. It's 0.032 of an inches thick, and that is a good thickness for these plates, because when you immerse this into that solution, that etchant solution, it's going to eat away some of that metal. So this thickness is excellent for that. What we want to do is, right out of the package, there may be some voids on this plate that won't allow for a nice flat even transfer. So one of the things that we want to do is, I've got some different grits of sandpaper here. I've got some 120, 220, 320, and then 400 grit. And I'm actually going to sand the surface of this brass plate, starting with the 120, going to the 220, 320, and then ending with the 420, to get a nice even surface for transferring our image. So we'll go ahead and start that, and we'll start with the 120. And you just want a nice even scratch pattern. Make sure you get around the edges real well. And then once you get a good sanding with the first grit, go ahead and switch to your next grit. And you'll be able to see the sanding scratches that you're creating get finer and finer on the plate, and you'll notice it to be a nice even surface when you're ready for transfer. Once again, make sure you go over your scratches and your edges and everything. And get a nice even scratch pattern. You want to be sanding on a hard surface so you have a nice flat surface. I always take a little extra time with the 320 and get a nice even scratch pattern. Once you're done with the 320, take a piece of paper towel and wipe off that sanding dust, and then take your 420 or your 400. You can stop at 320, but I go up to 400 just to get a nice flat surface. You can sand in opposite direction, but if you do that, go back to going in one direction. Just get everything nice and even. Okay, once that's all done, go ahead and wipe off that sanding dust. And then you want to take, I use blue tape, but you can use double-sided tape too. I just use blue tape. And I just put some on the back and stick it down, that way that plate doesn't move, but my camera does when I shake the table. That way it's pretty solid. And then we're going to take our transparent film, and when it's printed with the ink side, it's in reverse image, and when you look through it, it reads correctly. You want to make sure that that toner side, the side that's got the toner and ink on it, is down. It should read properly when you mount this on your plate. Go ahead and align this up with your plate. And then take a piece of blue tape and tape down your transfer, or your your transparent, so it doesn't shift or move. You want it to be able to where you can lift and kind of look at your results, but you don't want it to move. Go ahead and check everything out, make sure that you're even where you want to be, and that looks good here. And we'll set the chemical aside for a minute. And I've got 3 bottles out here because it takes about 1 of these bottles to cover this entire plate. Depending on how deep your dish is, it'll take about 1 of these bottles. But the great thing about this etching solution, it's reusable, and I just pour it into an empty jar. I don't ever put the used stuff back into my new bottles. I put it in a separate container, and it can be reused and reused as much as you need. And the thing about it is the more you reuse it, you might need to let it sit in that solution a little bit longer to get your proper depth of your etching that you want. But now that we've got everything set up and our plate is secure, our transfer is secure, go ahead and we'll take the iron. And the first thing we're going to do is, I always start at the top corner and run it down the plate all the way across to get it flat and warm. And then, depending on the size of your iron, I'll let it sit in one area for a few minutes, and then I'll move it over, and then I'll start ironing it on. And it doesn't take very long to transfer this. As a matter of fact, one of the things is, if you let it sit too long, then it ends up you don't get a good transfer. It ends up coming right back onto the transparency film. Once it transfers onto that metal plate, that toner does, then you're done. So we'll go ahead and get this transferred on, and then we'll be ready for the next step. Guys, once you get start getting a pretty good transfer, one of the tricks, one of the things I want to show you to make sure that you get a good transfer as you're removing this off is get your iron set up towards the far end of the transfer film and start ironing back and forth as you lift the image. Okay, there's still a couple areas that I need to touch up. I'll drop that back down. Get a nice bead across this edge. You gotta pay attention to the edges to make sure that they get a lot of heat and pressure to them. And then we're going to start that peel again. Until your image is completely peeled off. Go ahead and take this off and set it aside, the film. And remember, your plate's going to be warm. Real warm. Real warm. Go ahead and let that sit aside for a minute to cool down, and then I'll show you how to I'll give you a look at this plate and I'll show you how to touch up some of the areas that the toner didn't transfer to very well. It's a real simple fix to make sure that you get a good solid etching and you don't etch anything that you don't want to etch. Alright guys, our plate has cooled down. And if you notice, there is some voids, and you'll see where the toner didn't transfer well and some of these gold areas shining through on the plate. Well, there's a quick fix for that. What we're going to do is, you want to get some, you can use an acrylic paint pen, or just get some black acrylic paint. The acrylic paint acts as a resist for the chemical as well. And you want to go ahead and get some of the paint on a paper towel. Get you a small little paintbrush, or something that you can just go through and touch up these areas. Just make sure you don't get any on your border, the little gold border around, or in your letters on your design. But you want to just get a nice little, it doesn't have to be perfect. You're just covering up some of the areas that you don't want the metal or the etchant solution to etch. So I'm just going to touch up some of these little lighter areas that the toner didn't transfer very well from. I'm going to make sure around the outer edge of my plate. If you can see what I'm doing here. I'll move this out of the way. And this is where the detail of your sign, like the graphics or whatever you put on it, if you have to do this little step here, this is where it gets tricky with touching up. Like if you have to touch up before you drop it in the etching solution. If you got a lot of graphics in here, a lot of detail in your graphics, you'll have to spend a lot of time, not necessarily a lot of time, but you'll have to spend some delicate time touching up these areas that didn't get transferred very well. Okay, so let me show you what I did, and it'll dry fast, but basically what I did was kind of touch up some of the areas that didn't transfer very well. And so now we're ready to go ahead and dip this into the solution. Get yourself a tray that accommodates this plate, the size of this plate. One of the first things you want to do, and what I do is I've got some clear packing tape here, but just some clear tape. And carefully turn your, you don't want to scrape up all that paint you just put on there. And tape up the whole back of your brass plate. That way the chemical will etch from the top down, from your image down, and not from the bottom up. If you have you know, any excess hanging over here, any tape, go ahead and cut that tape flush with your plate. Okay, so now that way you have your image, and then the complete back is completely taped off. And I left some blue tape on there, but it's underneath this other tape. Go ahead and set that in to your tray, and go ahead and pour in your etching solution. You don't want to splash with this, and the one thing I'm going to recommend to you is get yourself a set of chemical gloves, because this chemical, it is, you know, it is corrosive. I mean, it eats metal. Imagine what it'll do to flesh. You don't want to get it on your skin or anything. Be careful, don't splash it. And when you're going to handle the plate to get it out of the etching solution, make sure you have some chemical gloves that you're wearing. You don't necessarily need them on to put this in, but you want to be very careful pouring this etching solution in. And this is already measured for that size tray, which is good. If you have on your containers, if you have any of that stuff is dripped out on your bottles and all, make sure you're careful when handling that. Now what you want to do is you want to let this plate sit in this solution for about 45 minutes. And like I said, the more and more you use this etching solution, you might need to let your plate sit in there a little longer, depending on the, you know, so it'll get a good etch, and you'll be able to check your progress as you go. But you want to periodically go through and oscillate or agitate your tray. Do not shake the heck out of it and splash this stuff all over you. Just a nice, what you're doing is, as that chemical etches that metal away, it creates a film of that etched metal over your plate. And by agitating, you're just creating a small little wave in your bowl that kind of brushes away that etched metal. And it just keeps brushing it away, brushing it away, brushing it away. One of the things you can do is get yourself, you know, this is the brush that I use to put my glue on and everything. It's kind of a soft bristle. I mean, it's pretty stiff from the, you know, the many times I use it for glue. But as this sits, I'll wait for about 15 minutes, and I'll lightly brush across this plate. You're not going to brush that toner or that paint off that's in that etching solution, you're not gonna hurt your image, but you're gonna just brush away that brushed metal. And then you can do that as a combination with agitating, but you do want to agitate. So we're going to let that sit for about 45 minutes, and we're going to come back and I'll show you the next steps. I want to go ahead and start thinking about this stand for the plaque. Now, if you remember, my brass plate is 10 inches long by 4 inches tall. The wood plaque that it's going to mount to has got a 1/2 inch all the way around that plate, so it's 11 by 5. I'm going to make an oak stand for it to mount it on, so it'll sit up on top of a desk or something, a shelf. And the stand is going to be made out of oak. And I made a little template for the design for one side that I want. And I cut it out of 1/4 inch hardboard, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it and mount it, and I'll go ahead and route it out and flush cut it. What I want to do is go ahead and attach the template using some double stick tape. Just so it doesn't go anywhere. And I'm leaving enough off of the bottom just so I have enough to work with. And now with that securely in place, I'll go ahead on the, you can use your bandsaw or scroll saw to go ahead and cut out some of this excess material, this waste material. And then we'll take it over to the router with a flush trim bit, and we'll go ahead and trace these patterns out and get our two sides done. Now that I got a majority of the waste cut away from the template, I can go ahead and take and run this against the flush trim bit and clean up this piece. Alright guys, I have a 2.5 inch wide piece of oak that I want to create a compound cut on. The first thing that I did was I set my angle at 5 degrees, as well as tilted my blade to 5 degrees to create that compound cut that I want for this base support. Okay, once that cut is made, I want to go ahead and keep my blade at a 5 degree tilt, and I want to move the bed to 5 degrees in the other direction. I want to take my piece and I want to completely swing it around and line up the blade with my mark, and my mark is at 7.5 inches from the long point to the long point. To create that compound cut. Alright guys, if you recall, over at the router table we took our 3/4 inch piece with the template on it and flush trimmed it all the way around to match that template. Once that was done, I went ahead and took this piece over to the bandsaw and resawed it in half, sanded everything smooth. And with this centerpiece that we just cut, Now I went ahead and I switched it up. I want a little bit of contrast in this base, so I went ahead and made a piece out of walnut. Same exact compound cut, the 5-degree compound cuts on each end. And what that's going to allow for is when this stand is, and I'm over exaggerating this a little bit, but it will allow it to lean in at the front and out towards the back, as well as lean in at the top and out towards the bottom. If you can see that, and that's an over exaggeration. I just want a little bit of a lean in both directions. So that was the reason for the compound cuts. Now what I did is where I want this arm to mount on the inside of this leg, I went ahead and traced around it and I drilled 2 holes. And what that will allow me to do is to match up both of these pieces. So that they line up perfectly. And then I can take and transfer those holes to the other side. And then I want to take a countersink bit and I want to countersink these holes. From my brass screws. Alright guys, I'm back over at the router table and I've got a 1/4" cove bit in the router, and I want to go ahead and cut the cove around the plaque piece that the brass plate's going to attach to. And that's going to be the cove profile, and I'm going to continue to raise my bit until I get to the desired height. Alright, our plate is etched. It took about an hour and 15 minutes. I had to stay in there a little bit longer than 45 minutes because I had used that etching solution a little bit, a lot. So it took a little bit longer to get the depth of etching that I wanted. But once that was done, the next step you want to do is go ahead with your gloves on, take it out of the chemical and rinse this thoroughly with warm water. Go ahead and peel your tape off the back and rinse it completely and dry it with a paper towel. Once it's dried and rinsed, you can go ahead and put your chemicals away. Be careful when you're pouring that tray of etching solution back into your container. Don't spill anything. And if you do, clean it up with some water. Water will stop that chemical reaction. Just the only thing I can stress is be careful when you're handling these materials. But now I have switched out and cleaned up my area, and I brought out the things I'm going to need for this next step. And what I have is I have some acetone, I have some 5-minute epoxy, and I have some Valspar gloss black paint. The acetone is for getting the toner and everything off the plate. What you can do, or what you want to do in this next step, is Put a little acetone on a rag and go ahead and start wiping away all this toner. You can see where the letters and everything are etched in. They're a little bit tarnished. That chemical does tarnish the brass. And then you have your brass outline. You know, everything else is good. So now, with everything cleaned up, we want to go ahead and darken our letters. This is where the magic happens. Okay. Now, we're going to use the high gloss black Valspar paint, and we're going to apply thin coats. You want thin coats. You don't want to cake this stuff on. But what we're going to do is, and very lightly, make sure that your paint is well mixed. Let's stop that camera from shaking. I'm sorry, I'm shaking the whole table. Alright. And lightly, can't stress that enough. You don't have to go real heavy, but get my paint spray in here. That's it. Now, and I'll lift this up and show you. Notice it didn't cover it completely. That's fine. That's your first light coat. Okay? We're going to let that dry for a few minutes. We're going to flip it around, because this time, the second coat, we're going to spray in the opposite direction. What that does is that'll get that paint up against those ridges and those letters and that etching and everything, and make sure that it's coated very well. So, and this Valspar dries within minutes. It dries quickly. Alright guys, it takes about 5 minutes in between coats, so our first coat is dried. Remember, when we first sprayed it, the plate was facing towards me. We're going to flip it around, and we're going to hit it with a light spray in the opposite direction. Alright, our paint is dried on our plate, and I already started cleaning it up a little bit, but here's what you're going to need to do next. Now, let's go back to the paint that we use. I use the Valspar black gloss. You can use an enamel paint, any type of enamel paint. You don't have to use Valspar, but any type of enamel paint will work just fine. If you use enamel paint, make sure that when you seal this, that you use a spray polyurethane to seal it. Don't use a lacquer. What I've got now is just a shop rag and a block of wood, and you want to take that block of wood and wrap it up. You want to get a nice tight, you don't want any sagging on that surface there, and you want to take some mineral spirits. Put some mineral spirits on that surface of that rag. Take another part of your rag and kind of smear it around and damp it, because you don't want it soaking wet. You want it just damp. And ever so lightly, you just want to start rubbing across your paint. And you don't want to put, I mean, I am barely touching this plate with the pressure. I'm just wiping, just barely touching this plate. And now guys, with this etched metal, it's not an exact science. I mean, if you want perfection on your plates, you know, then you're going to need like a laser engraver or something. But doing it this way, you know, these little shop-made plates, you can't control, even though the toner acts as a resist to the chemical, you're dealing with an acid that etches away metal. And you can't control the little, if you've got little divots or creases or, you know, little things, imperfections. And let me show you what I'm talking about here. And I'll be able to get a lot of it with a paint, but you see these little dots here under the A and all? That's where, you know, that etching solution got below the toner, or maybe there wasn't a good enough coating on the toner there. and there's a little crevice there. It's not flat on the surface, so you might have to, you know, pay a special attention to them. It's all in the prep, but it's not an exact science. It's not going to be a perfectly beautiful brass plate. You're going to have a few little imperfections and stuff, and that's still, I think it's the whole beauty of, you know, being handmade by you. If you use an enamel paint, go ahead and coat it with a couple of coats of polyurethane, clear polyurethane, to protect that paint, you know, from scratching out. But now the fun part. All right, you saw earlier in the video, this is our plaque that we use, this walnut piece here. Our plate is going to go on to this walnut plaque, just like this. And what I'll do is I'll go ahead and adhere this to the plaque, and I'll coat the whole thing. I'll just go ahead and finish this with a couple of coats of spray polyurethane. Close that up. Take your epoxy or whatever you want. Another good thing, and I'll tell you this, I swear I'm not shooting for Titebond or, you know, advertising for them, but this Titebond instant glue, it's for wood, metal, plastic, you know. This stuff works good too. You only put it on one surface, so you can put it on this coat here and then lay your plate on, and it'll adhere to it. Or you can use epoxy. I'm going to use epoxy for this demonstration, but the Titebond, I use that for everything. It's good stuff. I might be using the Titebond if my epoxy don't come out of this bottle quickly enough. That's these little 5-minute bottles. There it is. This stuff is 5-minute epoxy, so I should have probably used a better applicator. I definitely don't want any kind of like squeeze out or anything, so I'm really thinning this stuff right across this plaque, being sure to stay a good distance from my edges. I don't want this stuff seeping out into this cove or anything and giving me a headache of a time trying to clean it up. All right. Now go ahead and place your plate on. Get it positioned where you want it. And let's see what I'm going to use. What am I going to use? Just something with a little bit of weight to it. Nothing real heavy. Go ahead and make sure you don't move your plate. Go ahead and put some weight on it and let it sit. All right, well, so we've made our brass plate. We've got our plaque. It just needs to be finished. And our base is done as well. Let me show you what that base looks like. Carefully set this aside. Clean up this area. So this is the little, I'll turn it this way so you can see. That's just a little walnut and oak sign stand that we made. But it's a nice little stand. I think it looks good. You can see the brass screws. I didn't plug them or anything. You can plug yours if you want, but I like the brass because I've got a brass plate and everything. But we're going to let that epoxy sit. We'll get this set up and we're all done. Okay guys, I hope you enjoyed this little project. I I wanted to go into some detail that I didn't go into in my last videos. I hope I covered a lot of bases that I missed in the prior videos on the same subject, but this is how to etch a negative image brass plate, and I hope you enjoyed it.